Most people do not understand human behavior until it hurts them personally. Before that, people still seem simple. You believe honesty will be respected, loyalty will be returned, and kindness will protect you from the worst parts of others. You assume that if your intentions are good, people will respond in a fair way. But life slowly reveals something darker, where human behavior is not driven by truth as much as people want to believe. It is often driven by emotion, fear, ego, insecurity, self-protection, and the need to preserve a certain image of the self. That is the dark truth. People do not always choose what is right. Very often they do not always choose honesty. They often choose the version of reality that allows them to stay comfortable inside their own identity. A person may say they value honesty but become defensive the moment truth makes them uncomfortable. A person may say they value loyalty but choose convenience when loyalty becomes costly. Or a person may say they value fairness, but quickly change the story when fairness no longer benefits them. And what makes this difficult is that many people do not even experience themselves as dishonest while doing it. They feel justified. That is what makes human behavior so dangerous, when you do not understand it deeply, or you expect people to live by what they say they believe. But many people live by what helps them avoid shame, protect pride, preserve comfort, or keep emotional control. This is why words alone can mislead you. Words can be beautiful. Words can be polished. Words can sound mature, thoughtful, and kind. Or behavior tells you what someone protects when they are under pressure. It tells you what matters most when image and honesty come into conflict. It tells you how much of a person is principle and how much is performance. That is why so many people get hurt by the same mistake, or they trust the words because the words are easier to live with. They ignore the pattern because the pattern is painful to accept. One of the darkest truths about human behavior is this: people often react to how you make them feel, not to who you truly are. You can be honest and still be called harsh, or you can be calm and still be called cold. You can be confident and still be called arrogant. You can be kind and still be treated carelessly. Why? Because many people do not respond to your character first. They respond to their emotional experience of your presence. If your growth makes them feel behind, they may become colder. Or if your honesty makes them feel exposed, they may resist you. If your boundaries make them feel less in control, they may call you difficult. If your peace highlights their chaos, they may quietly resent you. This is why human behavior often feels unfair. You think people are responding to what is true, but many are responding to what your existence stirs up inside them, and many are not self-aware enough to admit that. Honestly, that is why wisdom begins when you stop asking only what people say and start watching what they repeatedly do. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that people rarely reveal who they are in easy seasons. Comfort hides character. When life is smooth, when nothing threatens their position, when there is no comparison, no loss, and no emotional cost, many people appear more generous, more patient, and more loyal than they truly are. Or a person may seem supportive while your dreams are still small. They may seem calm while the relationship still works in their favor. They may seem honest while honesty costs them nothing. They may seem loyal while there is no temptation to choose convenience over principle. That is why so many people feel shocked later. They think someone changed, but often the person did not suddenly become different. Pressure simply exposed what comfort had been hiding. This is one of the most important truths about human behavior. Do not study people only by how they act when life is pleasant. Study them by what happens when they feel threatened, overlooked, corrected, disappointed, or no longer in control. Or, that is when hidden behavior begins to surface. Some people become fairer under pressure. Others become more honest. Others become defensive. Some stay grounded. Others start distorting reality to protect their pride. That is why pressure reveals more than promises. Or a person may intend to be good, but reaction reveals what is stronger than intention in that moment. A person may believe they are loyal, but their behavior under temptation may show otherwise. A person may think they are emotionally mature, but one wound to their ego may expose pettiness, avoidance, or manipulation. Or another dark truth is that many people do not want fairness as much as they want favorable outcomes. People speak beautifully about justice, honesty, and doing the right thing. But when doing the right thing starts costing them comfort, status, control, or image, many begin negotiating with it. They want fairness until fairness puts them in the wrong. Or they want honesty until honesty threatens how others will see them. They want loyalty until loyalty demands sacrifice. They want truth until truth becomes inconvenient. That is why moral language can be misleading. A person can sound principled while behaving in self-interest. They can speak about values while quietly protecting convenience. Or they can defend fairness in theory while avoiding it in practice. This does not mean values are fake. It means values only become visible when they are expensive. Anyone can sound honorable in easy conditions. The real question is who stays honorable when being honorable costs them something. Another dark truth is that disappointment reveals people. When people do not get what they want, do not receive the response they expected, or feel less important than they hoped, something inside them becomes visible. Some people can carry disappointment with dignity, others cannot. Some stay respectful even when hurt. Others become colder, more passive, aggressive, more dismissive, or more manipulative the moment life stops rewarding them. Or that is why real character is not measured only by warmth. It is measured by what remains when comfort disappears. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that many people do not want clarity as much as they want emotional advantage. This is where relationships become dangerous. On the surface, people say they want honesty, maturity, healing, and better communication. But when a difficult moment arrives, many are not truly trying to understand, or they are trying to keep the emotional upper hand. That upper hand can take many forms. Sometimes it is control over the story, sometimes it is control over your guilt, sometimes it is control over your confusion, sometimes it is control over how much space they still occupy in your mind. Or this is why some people never answer the real issue directly. If they answer directly, the truth might become too clear. So behavior moves sideways. They become vague. They avoid direct language. They focus on your tone instead of the pattern. They act wounded, so you stop asking honest questions. Or that is not always dramatic manipulation. Sometimes it is simply immaturity mixed with fear. But the effect can still be deeply damaging, because once someone starts protecting emotional advantage more than truth, the relationship stops being clean. Now you are no longer dealing with one issue. You are dealing with confusion layered on top of the issue, or distance layered on top of the issue, deflection layered on top of the issue. This is why confusion is so exhausting. It keeps the wound open while hiding the cause. Another dark truth about human behavior is that patterns are usually more honest than words. Words can be shaped, words can be softened, or patterns are harder to fake over time. A person may say they care, but their pattern may show indifference. They may say they support you, but their pattern may show discomfort with your growth. They may say they are honest, but their pattern may show selective truth. They may say they respect you, but their pattern may show repeated carelessness. This is why repetition matters so much. One bad moment can be explained. A repeated pattern usually cannot. One cold day may mean stress. Repeated coldness after your boundaries may mean resentment. One misunderstanding may be human. Repeated confusion after direct conversation, or they know, consciously or not, that many people would rather keep believing in potential than accept what the pattern is already proving. That is how people get trapped, not always by one dramatic betrayal, but by repeated small patterns that slowly train the mind to non-instability. And that is why wisdom means watching patterns more than promises. Another dark truth about human behavior is that people often do not want truth as much as they want relief. This is one of the hardest things to accept because most people speak as if truth is the highest value. They say they want honesty. They say they want clarity. But when truth brings discomfort, many people do not move toward it. They move toward whatever helps them feel better fastest. That relief can come through excuses, through blame, through denial, through acting confused when the pattern is obvious, through making your reaction look like the bigger issue. That is why so many painful conversations go nowhere. One person is trying to face what is real, the other person trying to escape the emotional weight of what is real. This explains why people can hear the same truth again and again and still not change. It is not always because the truth was unclear. Sometimes it is because change would force them to feel something they do not want to feel. Shame, guilt, loss of control, loss of innocence, and many people will defend that preferred version of themselves at almost any cost. Another dark truth about human behavior is that people often punish what exposes them. People say they respect honesty, but often only when honesty confirms what they already want to believe. The moment honesty becomes uncomfortable, behavior changes. A person may become defensive, they may become colder, they may become sarcastic, they may reduce containing your tone, your timing, or your motives, or act because being seen too clearly can feel threatening to someone who is not ready to face themselves. This happens everywhere. Someone can enjoy your presence while you are warm, flexible, and easy to understand. But the moment your clarity reveals something about them they do not want to confront, they begin resisting you, not always openly, or sometimes through quiet disrespect, sometimes through a change in energy. They never explain honestly. That is why not every rejection means you were wrong. Sometimes your presence became too revealing. Sometimes your standards exposed their entitlement. Sometimes your peace exposed their casual place inside them. Or another dark truth is that many people prefer emotional convenience over moral consistency. They may talk about loyalty, but choose whatever feels easier in the moment. They may talk about respect, but only give it when there is something to lose. They may talk about love, but act in ways that are mostly about access, comfort, and control. That contradiction confuses a lot of people. But caring is not the same as character. A person can care about you and still behave selfishly. They can love you and still manipulate you. They can appreciate you and still resent what you represent. That is because human behavior is often mixed. People are not driven by one clean motive, or they may feel affection and insecurity at the same time, love and envy at the same time, admiration and resentment at the same time. And without maturity, those contradictions create dark patterns. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that people often do not reveal their real character through affection. They reveal it through limits. Affection can be easy. It is easy to be warm when things feel good, easy to be generous when there is no cost, easy to be close when the dynamic is comfortable, but limits change everything. The moment you say no, pull back, protect your time, or stop giving the same easy access, behavior starts to speak more honestly. Some people adjust with maturity, others do not. Some respect the limit, others treat the limit like an offense. That reaction matters because it reveals whether the person valued you or simply valued how available you were. This is one of the hardest lessons for kind people to learn. They often think love will be understood through how much they give. They believe patience will be appreciated. They believe loyalty will naturally create respect. But human behavior often works differently. What is always available is often felt less deeply. What has no clear limits is often treated less carefully. That is why some people only realize your value when your accessibility changes. Not because they suddenly became wiser, but because limitation forces awareness. When you are always there, people can become careless. When you are not, they are finally forced to notice what your presence was carrying. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that people often test what they can get away with. Not always dramatically, not always consciously, but often enough that it shapes entire relationships. They test tone, they test patience, they test how much inconsistency you will exclaim away. They test whether your standards are real or only spoken. This is why repeated small behavior matters so much. One broken expectation may be human, a repeated pattern is a message. One careless moment may mean stress. Repeated carelessness usually means the person has learned that the relationship will survive without much effort from them, or that is where many people get hurt. They keep looking at intention while the other person is learning through repetition, and nothing really changes. No consequence, no real distance, no real shift in access. So the behavior continues. That is why boundaries are not just protective, they are clarifying. A boundary does not only tell others where the line is, or it reveals who respects the line and who resents it. And the people who resent healthy boundaries often reveal something important. They were more comfortable with your openness than they were respectful of your dignity. Another dark truth is that many people confuse being needed with being loved. A person may stay close because you regulate their emotions, because you listen, because you reassure, because you make life easier, and all of that can feel intimate. But need is not always love. Sometimes people are attached to the role you play in their emotional life more than to your full humanity. That is why their behavior shifts when you stop playing that role the same way. Do they still value you when you are less useful? Do they still treat you well when you are no longer emotionally convenient? Those answers tell the truth, because people show who they are most clearly when comfort is interrupted, when limits appear, and when the easy version of the relationship is no longer available. That is, when behavior stops performing. That is, when behavior starts revealing. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that people often become most revealing when comparison enters the room. Comparison changes energy faster than words do. A person may like you when they feel equal beside you. They may support you when your growth still feels distant. They may feel warm when your potential is still only a possibility. But once your progress becomes visible, behavior can shift. Not always because they hate you. Sometimes because your life begins to reflect something back to them that they do not want to face. Your discipline may remind them of their inconsistency. Your peace may remind them of their inner chaos. Your success may remind them of their delay. Or your confidence may remind them of their fear. That is why growth changes relationships. People do not always respond to your rise with clarity. Many respond through the filter of their own insecurity. And when insecurity starts shaping behavior, fairness usually becomes weaker. This is where envy often hides. Or sometimes it is reduced warmth, delayed support, a colder tone, a strange silence where encouragement used to be. Sometimes it looks like pretending not to notice your progress. Sometimes it looks like downplaying what you built. Sometimes it looks like being supportive in public, but distant in private. Very few people will say, or instead behavior shifts sideways. They become harder to read. Quieter around you wins, more critical in subtle ways, less emotionally generous than before. If you do not understand comparison, you may keep blaming yourself for a change that was never truly caused by your behavior. Or this is why one of the darkest truths about human behavior is that people do not only relate to who you are, they also relate to what you represent. To some people, your life represents possibility. To others, it represents pressure. To some, your success is inspiring. Or to others, it is a mirror they were not ready to stand in front of. That is why the same version of you can be loved by one person and quietly resented by another. The difference is often not your character, it is what your presence awakens inside them. Or another dark truth is that people often support your struggle more easily than your proof. Struggle feels safe. Proof changes hierarchy. When you are still becoming, people can encourage you without having to emotionally recalculate anything. But once your growth becomes real, once your value becomes visible, once your peace becomes stable, the emotional meaning of your presence, or now they are no longer standing next to potential. They are standing next to evidence, and evidence is harder to ignore. That is why some people clap loudly in the beginning and quietly disappear when you actually rise. Not always because they wanted you to fail, sometimes because your success became too real to keep feeling neutral about. Or another dark truth is that insecurity often speaks through judgment. People rarely say, "I feel small next to this." They judge instead. They call your confidence arrogance. They call your distance coldness. They call your boundaries selfishness. They call your peace boring. They call your ambition obsession. Or, if your presence stirs up discomfort, it is emotionally easier for someone to reduce you than to examine themselves. That is why not all criticism is wisdom. Sometimes criticism is projection with a confident voice. And once you understand that, you stop shrinking your growth to preserve other people's comfort. Another dark truth about human behavior is that people often choose emotional comfort over honest accountability. This is why so many situations stay unresolved for so long. On the surface, people say they want peace, they say they want closure, they say they want to move forward. But real closure, required, or it requires someone to admit what they did, what they avoided, what they distorted, or what they protected at your expense. Many people would rather keep their comfort than face that kind of honesty. So instead of accountability, they offer softer substitutes. They give partial truth, they give vague apologies, or they act like time should erase everything. They make it sound like revisiting the issue is the real problem. That is why some wounds stay open, not because they were impossible to heal, but because one person wanted resolution and the other wanted escape from discomfort, or they would rather restore the surface than repair the foundation. They want the tension gone, but not if it costs them pride. They want normal again, but not if normal requires them to confront the damage they caused. That is not healing, that is avoidance wearing peaceful language. Another dark truth is that many people do not feel responsible for the confusion they create if they did not create it aggressively. A person can confuse you gently, they can mislead you softly, they can withdraw without clarity, they can keep you emotionally uncertain without ever saying one openly cruel sentence. And because the behavior is subtle, they often do not experience themselves as harmful. They tell themselves they were overwhelmed, unsure, stressed, or just trying to avoid conflict. But the effect on the other person can still be real. That is why emotional damage is so often minimized. People think only sharp cruelty counts, only betrayal counts, or only obvious disrespect counts. But confusion counts too. Inconsistency counts too. Prolonged vagueness counts too. Silence used to avoid truth counts too. A person does not need to raise their voice to dialyze you. They only need to keep you in a pattern where clarity never fully arrives. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that many people are more afraid of being seen as wrong than actually being wrong. Once someone becomes attached to looking mature, loyal, kind, or reasonable, they may defend that image even while acting against it. They are no longer responding to the real issue, or they're responding to the threat against how they want to be perceived. That is why some people argue with facts that are already obvious, not because the facts are unclear, but because agreeing with them would damage the version of themselves they are trying to preserve. And once image becomes more important than reality, behavior bends. Truth gets softened, or memory gets rearranged. Responsibility gets split unfairly. Language becomes selective. Another dark truth is that people often reveal their deepest immaturity in how they respond to your clarity. As long as you are unsure, they feel safer. As long as you are still explaining, still hoping, still giving the benefit of the doubt, the dynamic stays open. But once you become clear, something changes. Once you name the pattern, once you stop romanticizing the inconsistency, once you begin protecting your peace, now behavior often becomes sharper. Some people grow colder, some become defensive, some try to pull you back into confusion because your clarity closes doors that your uncertainty kept open, and many people do not like losing those hiding places. Another dark truth about human behavior is that people often look deeper than they are because you interpreted them generously. This is painful, but important. Sometimes what looked complex was just inconsistency. What looked mysterious was just avoidance. What looked emotionally deep was just emotional. What looked like a complicated connection was just unclear behavior that you worked very hard to make. Meaningful, thoughtful people do this all the time. They analyze, they empathize, they search for the hidden wound behind the behavior. They assume there must be depth because the pain feels deep. But pain does not always come from depth. Sometimes it comes from repetition, from confusion, from unmet expectations, from the simple fact that unhealthy behavior repeated long enough creates emotional chaos. This is why wisdom requires not only empathy but sobriety. Not every pattern deserves a poetic explanation. Not every mixed-sin connection is profound. Sometimes they are just immature. Sometimes they do not know how to hold truth, limits, or discomfort. Sometimes they are simply protecting themselves badly. And if you keep assigning depth to behavior that is really just immature, you may stay loyal to it much longer than you should. That is dangerous. Or, because the more meaning you assign to a pattern, the longer you may stay emotionally attached to it. Another dark truth about human behavior is that fear often looks more sophisticated than it really is. People avoid because they fear discomfort. They distort because they fear shame. They judge because they feel insecureness. Or they withdraw because they fear exposure. The pain created by these behaviors can feel deep and complicated, but the behavior underneath it is often painfully ordinary. That realization can be freeing because once you stop over-romanticizing confusing behavior, you become clearer, or you stop giving elegant language to patterns that are simply unhealthy. Another dark truth is that many people only seem self-aware in language, not in action. They may know the right words. They may talk about healing, boundaries, growth, honesty, and maturity. They may sound thoughtful. They may sound emotionally intelligent. But language is not transformation. A person can speak the language of self-awareness and still behave in ways that are defensive, avoidant, or manipulative. They can describe healthy dynamics beautifully while repeatedly failing to create them. That is why actions must carry more weight than vocabulary. Or do they take responsibility? Do they become clearer over time? Do they respect limits when those limits do not benefit them? Do they repair what they damage? Those answers matter more than how evolved they sound. Another dark truth about human behavior is that some people want to be understood more than they want to become honest. They want empathy for their wound. They want patience for their confusion. They want compassion for their fear. But they do not want the next step, which is responsibility. That is where many connections get stuck. You keep understanding, they keep repeating, you keep seeing the pain behind the behavior. They keep using the pain to avoid changing the behavior. This is why empathy without judgment can become self-betrayal. Because understanding someone does not automatically make them safe. Seeing why they act that way does not erase what their pattern does to you. And maturity means learning that both things can be true at once. You can understand their wound and still refuse their pattern. That is not coldness, or that is clarity. Another dark truth about human behavior is that self-interest is almost always somewhere in the room, even in friendship, even in love, even in family, even in loyalty. This does not mean every person is selfish in a cruel way. It means self-interest influences behavior far more than most people want to admit. People protect comfort, or they protect image. They protect emotional safety. They protect whatever helps them avoid pain or keep advantage. That is why some people stay close while you are useful and drift when you are not. That is why some become more respectful once your value becomes visible. That is why some only miss you when your absence affects them directly. Oh, this is one of the darkest truths because self-interest often hides inside good language. Convenience calls itself connection. Dependence calls itself love. Control calls itself concern. Emotional access calls itself closeness. And if you are naive, you may accept the language while missing the motive underneath. Or another dark truth about human behavior is that many people do not ask what is right as often as they ask what cost me least. That question shapes more behavior than most people realize. What keeps my image safest? What keeps me from feeling ashamed? What keeps this comfortable? What lets me avoid accountability? What helps me keep access without paying the full emotional price? Once you understand that, many confusing behaviors start making sense. A person may delay honesty because honesty costs too much, or they may stay vague because vagueness keeps their options open. They may blame your reaction because blame helps them avoid shame. They may withdraw without explanation because direct truth would force courage they do not have. This does not excuse the behavior, but it explains it. Another dark truth is that people often show you what they value most by what they consistently protect. If they protect image over truth, that tells you something. If they protect comfort over repair, that tells you something. If they protect control over connection, that tells you something. But what a person defends under pressure reveals more than what they claim in calm moments. This is why mature people stop listening only to promises. They watch choices. They watch repetition. They watch what happens when there is something real to lose, because words reveal ideals. Truths reveal loyalties are often less flattering than spoken values. Another dark truth about human behavior is that many people want the benefits of depth without the cost of depth. They want closeness without vulnerability. They want love without accountability. They want understanding without honesty. They want emotional safety without doing the work that real safety requires. That is why so many relationships feel emotionally intense but structurally weak. There may be feeling, but not discipline. Attachment, but not truth. Need, but not stability. And when pressure comes, the weakness shows, because depth without structure cannot hold weight for long. This is where many people get disappointed. They mistake strong feeling for strong foundation. The intensity can exist where maturity does not. So the real question is never just how much do they feel. It is also what can their character actually hold. That question protects you from confusing emotional force with emotional reliability. Well, the darkest truth about human behavior may be this: people are full of contradiction. They can care and compete at the same time, love and resent at the same time, admire and envy at the same time, need you and still disrespect. You want truth and still avoid it, or this contradiction is what makes people so hard to understand when you still expect them to be internally simple. But human beings are not simple. They are layered, wounded, proud, afraid of loss, hungry for closeness, protective of identity, capable of tenderness and selfishness in the same season, sometimes in the same moment. But it explains why so much behavior feels mixed. A person may genuinely care about you and still act from insecurity. They may mean well and still create confusion. They may feel love and still choose themselves when pressure rises. This is why maturity matters so much. Without maturity, people do not know how to carry contradiction honestly, or they do not know how to say, "I care about you, but I am threatened," or "I love you, but I am acting from fear," or "I know the truth, but I do not yet have the courage to face it." So instead, the contradiction leaks into behavior, through distance, through defensiveness, through inconsistency, through avoidance. That is why human behavior can feel so dark, not only because people hurt each other, but because they often do it while still believing they are good. And that makes clarity difficult. But this is also where wisdom begins. Wisdom is not pretending people are pure. Wisdom is learning to see them clearly without losing yourself. It means you stop trusting words faster than patterns. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop calling repeated wounds misunderstanding. You stop begging confusing people to become clear. You also stop taking every disappointment as a personal failure. You begin to understand that much of human behavior is shaped by forces inside people that existed long before you arrived. Or their shame, their ego, their need for control, their discomfort with truth, their inability to hold contradiction honestly. That does not mean you excuse everything. It means you understand more accurately what you are dealing with. And accuracy protects peace, because once you truly understand the dark truth about human behavior, something inside you changes, or you become less naive but not cold, less easily fooled but not closed, less addicted to explanation but more loyal to pattern, less likely to lose yourself in other people's contradictions. You still believe in goodness, but now you understand that goodness must be protected by awareness. You still value honesty, but now you know not everyone can face it. Or you still love, but with boundaries, with observation, with self-respect. That is the real gift hidden inside this hard lesson. Not bitterness, clarity. Because clarity lets you keep your heart without handing it blindly to every person who speaks beautifully. Clarity teaches you to listen deeper, watch longer, and in a world where many people only understand human nature after pain, that kind of clarity is not cynicism, it is wisdom.